listening to everybody's sort of entry stories into this business, it made me think of something, because in a lot of the pieces that I've written over the last few years, I've talked to students and I've talked to educators at the various facilities around the world, and they invariably tell me that people come in wanting to be producers. And in many cases, they leave school as producers, at least in their own minds, because they've certainly got the capability to do it right now. You can go down to a store, and for a few $1,000s, you can have yourself all the tools that you need to be a producer. What does everybody think about that? I mean, all of you paid dues, so to speak, to become producers. And now you've got a situation where someone can actually at least assert themselves to be a producer upon... They don't even have to go to school for it, actually. You can simply go to the store. What do you think about that? What does that do to the production, to the record-making process? Anybody?
I think, the way I convinced myself that I could be a producer was watching other people doing it badly. It was really, growing up as a tape-op and engineering at Abbey Road, the number of complete arseholes you were working with, it was happening almost every day. And they said, I can do this, I can handle this production better than this guy can. And it was just determination, and that's all it is. All it really takes is a determination to succeed and achieve.
Well, what do you think about how not having that kind of history, so to speak, that coming up through tape duplication, or as a musician, or nuclear physics, or just whatever you've done in the background before you? In other words, it seems to me that producer might be something that you achieve as opposed to something that you start out at. I mean, does it have an effect on music, do you think? Does it affect on the way records sound?
Well, I think you end up with two different kinds of product. You end up with one product that we do, and people that have been around a long time. The outcome is based on your experience and the things that you learn and the things that you like. After trying 400 different ways to do each thing, you come up with your favorite thing, and that's what makes Alan's records sound like Alan's records. And me, for one, I like that, and I like the way Desmond writes songs. And when the Rouge album came out, I was in New York working on a Steely Dan thing. Mm-hmm. And I heard something on the radio, and I went, what? That's really cool. Went right down to the store and bought the thing, and I listened to it every single day. I went, I wish my records would be like this. I'm serious. And it's like, learning things from that, and so this experience leans toward how my records are made. Somebody that's new to it and doesn't have that experience, they go into the school and they learn all the mechanical part of producing the record. They're going to make different sounding things, and some of them are going to be great, and some of them aren't. It's just they're going to be starting from a space where they might not know that you can't do that, and they'll go out and do it. It's like inventing a time machine or something. So, and then it happens all the time with the stuff that you've done that is this whole different thing than the stuff that I've done. But I like it. I wouldn't necessarily start out making a record like you do, but I like your records, and there's part of that. There's all different kinds of genres and things, and there's new things coming out all the time. There used to be just one Billboard chart. Here it is, the chart. Now there's 72 pages of different genres of music, and they all have their charts because it's starting to spread out, and it can because people can produce records that are different than the way that we've done, because of their difference in experience.
Our campus in Frankfurt has a question pretty much for the panel along these same lines. How important do you think it is in the different stages of being an engineer or a producer to actually have a good basis of music theory, and do you have to have a good basis of music theory to take it to that next level, or is it just everybody has their own way of doing things, and that's the end of the day?
Well, I'll start by saying that I consider myself a keyboard owner, not a keyboard player, and I can go through and thanks to MIDI, I can figure some things out and do some things, but I can't do it. So I'm not a musician. I'm from the technical end of it, and records that I've produced and engineered, I think came out very well, and they may be different than if Alan did, produced the same artist or whatever, because he's got a different way of looking at it. He's an excellent musician, and if somebody else can't play the part that he has in mind, he can go out and do it. Things like that, right?
You obviously haven't spent very much time in a room with me playing it.
But and then other input, So
I think musical training can certainly do no harm. I had formal training. I studied piano and flute, and although I never graduated to orchestral composition or anything like that, at least I can. I would say I can follow a score rather than read a score. So, and for a lot of the engineering jobs I was doing in my the early part of my engineering career, it was very important to be able to, talk to the arranger and the producer about the black and white dots on paper in terms of the final production.
Frankfurt, asking back, at what point did you call yourself a producer in your career?
When did I call myself a producer? I think I just got a lucky break. I was handed a band by EMI on a plate. They were called Pilot, and I had a hit with them.
In the sense somebody else called you a producer first.
Yeah, in a way. It kind of followed on from Dark Side of the Moon. I think EMI's A&R department said, we think this engineer guy that worked with Pink Floyd may be able to make a record for us. And, they just handed me a job, and I did it. Lucky break. That was just, all this industry is about is lucky breaks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. See, I never knew I couldn't even tell if the note was flat, what an E was, what a C was, what a D was, because I was dealing with samples. But once I started dealing with musicians, bringing studio musicians, when I needed to translate my ideas across to them and get it across, I couldn't say, play it like this. I had to go back and learn things so I could speak to them in their language so I can get across what I needed to get across.
Wow. Okay, Modes, Cologne. Cologne is asking, how did you produce the Puppet Master? And they'd like to know about the way you work and how you achieve the particular style that you have. Be Real and Dre, were they the influences that they were and what you do?
Well, that song, it's like I played the pianos. It was just a simple, one bar pattern. Played the bass line over it, programmed the drums to it, and then called Dr. Dre, and he was like, do you have a concept for the song? And I didn't have a concept, so I went back and thought of a bunch of ideas for the songs. I came up with a song called The Puppet Masters, who basically are the guys pulling the strings and the rap music, in the game, the guys controlling the game. So I went back to Dre with that concept. He liked it, so they wrote the song, about I'm running the rap game, I'm controlling it, this is how it is. And we went through the lyrics word for word. We changed things, got it to write how we wanted it, and then we took it from there.
Very cool.
Did it start with beats or did it start with lyrics?
That song started with a piano line, actually.
Just with the piano
I
line.
added the bass, and I added the drums after. And then came up with the concept before we even wrote the lyrics or the chorus.
Right.
Once I had the title of the song, then it was easy.
Each of you has are there any more questions coming right up here? Or
I'm just going to chime in as one of we're just kind of a panelist as well. Just all sit around all over.
Everybody here has a specialty in the studio. I know several people have told me, Desmond, that they are amazed at your ability to elicit a vocal from people. And if you each just talk about the one thing that you think you're strongest with in the studio, perhaps it's mastering, whatever it is. But vocals, it's anything can be programmed. But when it comes right down to a human being actually singing, what do you do to get that performance out of somebody?
Well, it just all depends. When I'm working with a great vocalist like Steven Tyler, or John Bon Jovi, or Leanne Rimes, or someone like that, they really have a distinctive style. So really it's about giving them the confidence to push themselves further than they've gone before. Sometimes big stars tend to do their tried and true tricks because they've gotten a positive response before. So I go, well, if I growl this way and if I squeak this way, then that's my signature sound that they're going to be looking for. But that's a certain way for their careers to end, because people now, when I was coming up, we'd follow an artist like Jethro Tull or James Taylor. We'd buy the next album and the next one. We followed their journey, and they'd go this way, that way, whatever. Now, I think there was an article in the New York Times last week where they were talking to kids about buying records, and so they said, well, next time Avril Lavigne puts out her record, are you going to buy it? They said, well, we already have her record. It's like,
as though they only get one record these days.
well, it's like a new way of thinking. It's like, oh, we know what that flavor is. What's the next flavor?
I think things are changing so quick now.
It's like, we already own one of those. It's like, and that's really, really different. It's a whole new world when you start thinking that way. So it becomes very important that an artist doesn't become stagnant.
So you want to challenge the artist a little bit,
To keep growing and to be in the moment, not caught in a hall of mirrors of the past successes. That sometimes they envision themselves in that video when they really made themselves important to the world, and then they get back in that character when they may be 10 years later. And so I see that that's one of the biggest challenges of working with people that are already superstars. When you're working with a new artist, they're searching to create themselves. So, then it gets a lot more difficult because they don't have the skill in the studio. And so then it's really hard to get a performance that has the internal tension and release that you need to deliver a captivating performance. And to me, it's all about being in the creative moment. If you can get an artist to let go of to have their technique down to the point where they don't have to think about it, and they can now express something from their spirit, that's when you start getting goosebumps. We sit there with some artists that we get, and it's just about comping, and after you do the 8 vocals, you comp it down to 1, and then they come back in the next day, and then you sing it again, and that one track you comp now becomes one of 9 vocals, and then the goosebump factor really starts to go away, and it's really a challenge to make people feel something. But I think when people keep it real and really start saying something, they forget that part of the task is to express something in that moment, to tell a story, to be reliving the emotion of the song in that moment when they're performing it. Sometimes they don't even know the song. They're looking at the lyric and they're following the words and they're going, oh, well, the note goes up here and goes there, and there's that little mark for me to take my breath there. And where's the magic? Where's the art?
They get a little lost in the mechanics, perhaps, there.
Well, because you can. Like the joke about the producer that says, the artist says, well, how did I do? They said, oh, you suck. Come on in. We'll fix it. It's cool.
So this is perhaps a little premature, but it's a time to bring up the subject of autotune and how it is overused. So many records I'm hearing have got autotune all over it, and it makes me vomit, literally. And it's
well, it certainly takes the human factor, the randomness out of it, doesn't it? But is that a danger?
And for those of you from Nashville, I'm sorry to say, country music is particularly guilty of it.
Oh yeah. But how much of a problem is that? How much of the humanity? When I flip on an oldie station in my car, and I listen to Aretha Franklin fry a capsule, or not, you'll hear the distortion coming in at the very end of the capsule's life, basically.
But that was a performance.
It was a performance, right? So how is this whole I mean, I don't want to just call it digital recording because that's kind of a broad stroke, but I mean, this ability to manipulate the emotion after the fact.
I mean, Dan, I always equate it to, it's like if you take a box of tools. If I have a box of tools at home with hammers and screwdrivers and saws, for every job, I don't have to use every tool I have in the box. I mean, I think the art is knowing kind of when to not do stuff like tune something, or the singer has the performance in him, you just isn't there yet. It's like he was talking about flow, and to me, the most important part in my job, the most important part is I never lose the flow of the performer. I'd rather have the sound be a little funky or a little problem here or there and get the performance out of them. Because if I lose that, I think that's the whole game.
Well, pop music is such an imitative form of expression. And remember, after Believe came out, the vocal effect on Believe, we heard an awful lot of that on a lot of records.
But that was a specific effect that worked for them. And I talked to the guys that did that song, and that was a fluke. But it happened to work for that song, and Cher liked that. But you don't see Cher trying to do that on every song that she does. It worked.
Just everybody else.
Well, maybe not that extreme, but the point is that worked in that particular time. You know.
So were they trying to auto-tune her and then just found that
he was trying to learn how to use the auto-tune. Mark, the guy, told me, and he said he stumbled upon it, and she heard it and said, "Let's use that in the verses."
And she actually had to fight the record label on it too.
Yeah.
Did you have to sing it deliberately flat to make it
I don't know.
the auto-tune kick in?
I didn't ask those many questions.
Put it at extremes, and it creates that. But you can't just put it overall just in a specific moment. You can use it to kind of in the transition between one note and another to create that slurpy sound. But it doesn't work because then it can take everything crazy. So you just edit it in where you want it.
I mean, on the subject of vocals, I mean, the battle always, to me, is the compromise between the great performance and getting it in tune. It's just a fact of life. Singers sing flat. But when there's no way around that.
When you listen to the oldies stations, it's amazing how much stuff is off pitch, but the record was still a hit and was still a wonderful thing.
With notable exceptions, I should say. I mean, if you've got a great singer, what a pleasure it is to work with a great singer that knows the technique to put him or herself in tune in a recording studio.
But the fact that
it's a great gift.
Excuse me, the fact that we have this crutch now doesn't challenge the singer to be better.
It's true.
Because they, in the back of their mind, go, "Oh, they can fix that. Forget it. I'm not going to put myself out." And there's something else too. I think that, I try to create an atmosphere in the studio that is kind of formal. My studio is called the Gentleman's Club. It looks kind of like an English gentleman's club with bookshelves with old books, and I sit in a very big chair, and I'm sitting there waiting for the artist to come in, and when they come in, I stand up. I try to create a formality to the event so that they walk in and give me a performance. But the proliferation of home studios and this kind of relaxed atmosphere doesn't do much for that diva moment. I think when you walked into one of those big RCA studios or A&M and you knew that clock was ticking and that orchestra was there or whatever, something would come over you and you'd give an inspired performance. Because there were all these people around and everybody was listening, and the person really had to deliver, and that doesn't happen with this kind of whenever, all that, and we can fix it later, and
you create drama basically.
I do, and a little bit of fear, because I think that people do better if they feel that they may be judged.
That's why a live performance record is always more atmospheric, and the
are artists less intimidated by the technology? I mean, certainly they were 20 years ago or 25 years ago. There was a boundary really between.
Dan, I can give you an example of like a year ago. I was doing a date, and the drummer was sitting on the couch behind me with a Mix magazine open. and he was having a talk about the microphones to a friend of his on the couch. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but he was having this very detailed talk about, well, the C12 and the 414, and it struck me how different that was, that they were thinking about gear and technology, and less about what they were playing at the particular moment. They had their nose in this, man. It was a change.
CJ, I wanted to ask you about vocals too. I remember doing an interview with the engineer for Wu-Tang Clan a few years ago, and one of the questions I asked him, and it kind of relates a bit to what we were talking about before about clicks and pops on records and whether they're desirable or not, is I said to him, why is there so much distortion, vocal distortion on the record? And his response to me was, this is not about making a technically or aesthetically perfect vocal. This is about capturing a moment. Somebody runs into the studio and says, "I've got something to lay on top of that. I got a rap to lay on top of that." Even though the mic is open and someone else is doing it, it's his job to capture it there. It's not to make sure, not to say, "Hey, wait a minute, let me take a second and get levels here." I mean, for you, for vocals,
I like to get levels and stuff, but still with rap, I go for the performance. If something's a little off or a word's a little slurred, I leave it.
and how
I
much
think that's some of the brilliance in it, you know what I mean? Capturing the performance, and that it kind of adds the character to it.
well, how much fixing do you find yourself doing after the fact, though?
Usually none. Usually
Really?
I try to get it all before they even walk out.
The record labels, are they expecting perfection? Maybe I wouldn't want to just blame artists here or technology itself. Are labels expecting perfection?
I think they are.
Yeah.
I think they are. I mean, I just had an experience where we were told by a production company that was doing this big television show that I got involved with, that, just give us anything. We can hear the song and all that. And so we did this demo that I thought was actually had a lot of spirit. Of course, it was just one drum beat without any fills, but you could hear the song. They said, "Oh, well, we love the song, but we don't like the direction of your production, so we're going to give the production to someone else." And it's like, didn't you just say you wanted something rough? Yeah, but we could just tell what direction you were going into. It's like, how could you tell that when we did it like in a hotel room in the Bahamas? So I don't trust them at all, and I spend an awful lot of money doing demos. I make masters. I can spend with demo rates up to $12,000 to make a demo, and I hope that I can sell that thing, so that I don't go deeper and deeper in the hole.
Is that what it takes to sell anything at this point, whether it's a song or an artist? I mean,
I've just been finding it that way. I mean, unless I'm on the inside with a group like Bon Jovi, who will go in and rehearse a song and do demos themselves, and of course I have to be there, because if things go sour that day and somebody's in a bad mood, that song could just go out the window. So I have to be in there. No, look, try it this way. Come on, let's try it one more time. And they're looking at me like, okay, we're trying it one more time. I mean, like important songs that almost fell through the cracks that way.
Desmond, when you're doing your demos, you're listening. S.A. Madrid popped in with the question of how much analog equipment is being used in that, or digital equipment. Are you mostly digital? Any analog when you're doing your demos? When you're talking about the price range, because sometimes some equipment's more expensive than others to use.
I think what we're doing now is I'm writing the song on a cassette on the piano, and I'm writing the lyrics and the melody and kind of imagining the groove. I take it over to one of my arrangers. They start getting the beat going, but the song's already written. I won't start a song without the song finished first. And then we're layering. We may say, this beat is, just not right. We need real drums. So then we'll send it over to our drummer, who has a setup in his house, and he'll lay live drums on there without us even being there. And for not that much money, it comes back. It sounds amazing. And he'll, if he has to, he'll beat detect it and get it all like tight for us and everything. And then we start layering in live guitars. So you know, by the end, it may not have any of the program stuff. That might just have been the framework on which to start. Because, you know, I mean, I made a record up in Beyersville Studios, which was one of the most fantastic experiences of my life, with a live band and all that. And then later on, we kind of laid, you know, some loops in for atmosphere and all that. But you know, I much prefer working that way. I mean, that's real music to me. But it's not working anymore. I had a discussion with my friend Rick Knowles, who produced the Santana song with Michelle Branch, Game of Love. He said, Desmond, we're not using live drums anymore. You crazy? And it still sounds like it's all live. And it's like amazing samples. And they just don't want to fool with it. Because flying in the drummer, and the drummer has to go first class, and then the rent-a-car, and then the per diem, and then the jokes, and then the jokes. They don't want to deal with that.
Oh, this has opened up a big flurry in the chat room, this analog digital question. And so, I mean, from even from Melbourne, Australia, which I believe is about 7 a.m. there, we've got questions for all the panelists to indicate analog digital as your dream format of which you would work in right now. If you could go record your record, your time, what you do. Eric, starting over here.
I think it would depend on what I'm recording. I mean, I really use both. A lot of times if I'm tracking drums live and other things and I want the sound of tape, I'll record the tape and then I'll transfer it afterwards to a Pro Tools or something along that line. But I couldn't really say that I have a particular dream format. It really depends on what I'm doing, material-wise.
But how are you making your choices between analog and digital formats in the course of a single project?
If I have a bunch of live guys in the room, players in the room, if I have my choice, I'd probably pick tape first. Mm-hmm. But it would also depend on what they expect us to do right when we're done with the track. If they really want to do a lot of splicing or sliding around or fly-ins, I may not go to tape first.
So in other words, you're making some pre-production decisions about the format.
Yeah, I need to know what tool is going to fit their production the best.
What about you, Alan? How are you making your choice?
I think one day, 20 years from now, we're going to be laughing at ourselves, thinking, why did we want the sound of analog when we can emulate it with this box or this plug-in or whatever? The business of going through the process of recording something on analog just to get the analog sound and then transferring it to digital because it's easier to manipulate and mess around with, it just sounds so ridiculous to me. I mean, it's a bit like film and video. I mean, the concept of recording on celluloid film one day will be laughed at. Right. Why don't you just do it on video and then give it the film look afterwards?
Well, how good is the emulation of analog?
Well, it's not good now. I mean, but it will get better. I mean, as we increase the bit rate, increase the resolution, one day somebody's going to say, wait a minute, I can't actually tell whether it's line in or whether it's a recording. Right. That's the point when it's going to...
Do you think the general public can tell the difference, though? Like the regular...
Absolutely not.
No, I don't. I don't think they care. Really.
But Muggs, as we were coming over here, you were talking about the way you incorporate analog. He's got some very vintage gear in his rack about how you incorporate analog into what you do. Is that because of the personal choice?
Well, I've always used analog because digital was just real slow for me. Because I like to just sit down and just do my things real quick. And by the time they would put something on to a computer and wait until to get it on there, it'd take too long for me. So I would just use tape all the time. So this year was the first time I started using computers, and I actually love it now. To be able to flip from song to song and save my mixes and edit parts out and move things around.
It's pretty seductive.
It's great.
Yeah.
So there's two things from the physics standpoint. Not thinking about the sound of originally recording on analog. I mean, there's some